does architecture mean to you? Architecture to me is the act of designing buildings. But not only is it the act, it is the intentional act of designing buildings. And for much of my education and even in the profession, it seems like architecture tries to sidestep or seem like it is apolitical, or that it's not a response to social movements and it won't cure social issues. But if you look at the history of architecture, it is deeply entrenched in politics and social issues, like the structure of architecture in the profession, the structure of how buildings were designed, were deeply a result of the social movements of time. So for me, architecture is intentional. There's intent behind the design. There's a reason why certain designs work well and certain designs fail, like Perdigo. So for me, it is the intentional act of designing. When and what got you interested in architecture? That's a really good question. That is a really good question. I kind of stumbled into architecture. Growing up, I really wanted to do engineering, and specifically, I really wanted to become a roller coaster designer. I played Roller Coaster Tycoon growing up, and it was one of my favorite games because I loved seeing the enjoyment and people getting sick. But I loved seeing the enjoyment of the people's faces when they got off the rides that I created, and I wanted to recreate that in some way in real life. But then I realized that you need to know science, and physics is big, and you need to be really good in math. And I wasn't a terrible student in math, but I also was not excelling in math. So I was taking an engineering class in my freshman year of high school, and I decided that, let me look at some alternatives to engineering. And there was architecture. And it seemed like it could give me that same satisfaction that I got with engineering these roller coasters. Also, as a kid, I really enjoyed playing with Lego sets. And I remember the first Lego set I had as a kid was just a little basic Lego box that had, all the pieces, but you really couldn't build too much with it, but you can explore with your little child mind. I really enjoyed that. But then my parents would give me, progressively larger Lego sets. And what I would try to do is I would try to first build it the way the book wanted me to. But then I would kind of go off script and build it the way I wanted to and reimagine what it was. Honestly, they usually came out terrible, right? They never looked anything. And it's like, I just should have stuck with the instructions. But that was another way of me kind of being creative. And also with those Lego sets, I would create little Lego cities alongside my Hot Wheels cars. So I would design streets. I would design places like the beach and recreational areas. I would design town halls and, a residential area. And this was my way of exploring how cities were and how they worked. And imagining myself in that city and seeing how happy I would be, similar to imagining myself at an amusement park when I was playing Roller Coaster Tycoon. So that's kind of where my interest in architecture started, and it just grew from there once I went to college. Where do you see architecture in the future? I see architecture becoming more equitable and accessible to a variety of income levels. One thing that architecture is struggling with currently is that it's struggling with the stigma of elitism. And I think that stigma comes from the mystique that architecture presents itself as. A lot of people do not understand what architects do. Here's an example. When I was studying architecture in college, so many people came to me and was like, hey, because you're doing architecture, you must know how to draw really well. And the reality is I can't sketch really well. I can sketch good enough to communicate an idea, but that's about it. Like, I'm not going to draw you Picasso or anything. So I feel like once we break down these stigmas and break down the mystique of what architects do, I think that makes our profession more valuable. So hopefully in the future, we can break down these barriers to, cater to the everyday person. I also believe that if you, release that veil from architecture, that will then lead to a more diverse candidate pool and diversity in schools. And that's ultimately what architecture needs.